Hello and welcome to Coffee with Dr. Carla. I'm Dr. Carla. This is Jessie, and we're glad that you're here with us today. We're going to talk about a few mental health related issues and hopefully start to end the stigma surrounding them. So as you and I have talked numerous times, you have been very open about the fact that the reason why you're doing what you're doing is your own addiction recovery journey and how that all transpired.
Yes.
And so I thought that it would be good for our listeners to hear about your journey so that perhaps they might see some of themselves in it and, you know, hopefully find some hope.
Yes, yeah. So my addiction started pretty young, you know, but I started with kind of doing a lot of the normal experimental stuff, you know, as a kid in high school, weed and some hallucinogens, and I was never a big drinker because my mom was such a heavy drinker, and I promised myself growing up, I said what many people say. There's actually a very famous book called It'll Never Happen to Me by a lady named Claudia Black about adult children of alcoholics, and that is because many of us who grow up with alcoholic parents or addicted parents, we go, not me. Yeah. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do this to my kids. I'm not. And it happened, you know, because what I didn't know back when I was 16, back when I was 14, back when I was 20, when I was doing it, when everybody was doing it, was that it was doing something different for me.
Right.
I thought I was experimenting. But what I was doing was I was learning a way to cope with things that I couldn't even name at that point because they were so big. And unfortunately, you don't realize which one of those things you are until it's too late often, right? So I didn't know because of, I had an extensive history of trauma. You know, I come from a long line of alcoholism and unchecked, untreated mental health and trauma. When I was 17, as I said, my mom was a pretty severe alcoholic. When I was 17, I lost my mom to suicide my junior year of high school, a month before my junior year of high school ended. So that was obviously crippling. I really struggled with that, and that's when I really kind of just dove more into substances and felt very justified in doing so. I was in pain, you know.
And because it was so systemic for your family, no one said, oh my goodness, we need to check on Jessie and make sure she's okay in a way that, I mean, they may have done that, but not necessarily in a way that involved examining behaviors and whatnot.
And what was also kind of systemic on the other end, on my dad's side, who was now raising us, was my dad wasn't raised in a family where therapy was a thing. You know, and now, you know, my dad, in retrospect, my dad did the best that he could. We are very close. He wishes he was raised by a World War II vet. They were all hardworking blue collar guys. Like,
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
You didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, so it went on for years, and again, like, I hung out with a lot of people who, we all were partying. Everyone was partying. We were in our 20s. It didn't seem bad. Again, in retrospect, I see ominous things that were happening then.
And to stop would mean that you would have to leave that group.
I would have to leave that group. I would have to leave probably my marriage. I would have to leave a lot of things. It just wasn't a thought in my head at that point, because I was comparing myself. Well, I had all these markers where I went, well, I'm not doing that. Well, I'm not doing, well, guess what? Started happening. Check, 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 check. Until I'm drinking vodka in the morning to put my eyeliner on because my hands are shaking. And a year before I got sober, my father's only brother, my uncle, my only paternal uncle, also committed suicide. And addiction was a huge part of both of these losses in my life. And so then it went to so then I spun out really hard, but in the back of my mind I went, I know where this is going for me, because I know what they lived with every day. I understand why they did what they did. So I was living with it.
So at this point, both of these suicides, besides being incredibly difficult to process, then also became perhaps an understandable solution. Is that what you mean?
They did. The only thing was like, so in my mind after losing my mom that way, I went, no matter how bad I feel, I would never do that to my family because
Sure.
I understand how bad it crushed everyone.
Right.
But now I get it.
But now you get it.
Now I get the hole that you were in, the way that you felt, because now I'm a mom too.
Right.
So now I'm looking at my mom's situation very differently. Now I'm understanding the shame of being a mother with an addiction who can't stop, who's hurting her kids, knows she's hurting her kids, and
so
can't
Yeah.
stop.
Oh,
It's
wow.
a level of shame that I cannot even convey to you. It's one of the few things that still to this day, you know, you have to do a lot of self-forgiveness and recovery because
Right.
you know, a lot of the trauma, and maybe we don't even think about this as much, especially as an outsider, a lot of the trauma for people who get really far into their addictions, yes, a lot of them have trauma that was inflicted on them by others, but a lot of their trauma is the things that they did.
Sure.
Which is maybe
all those
worse.
Impulsive, compulsive, risky
Yes.
behaviors that come
Yes.
about because
hurting
we are
the people
using.
you love.
Yeah. Right.
We don't even. I mean, we go on. It gets ugly. It gets dark
Yeah.
and it gets ugly, and it crushes your soul and your self-esteem and your belief that you could ever be a good person. Because how could I be a good person
Right.
if I did these things? So anyway, however, I will say that those two horrible losses also caused me to go, I know why I am the way I am.
Right.
I know why my mom was the way she was. Now we've got somebody who's next in line, and that's my son. My son is next in line for this life if I don't do something. And this is why I'm very stern about do not wag your finger at people and tell them you can't do it for other people.
Right. Right.
Because if someone would have told me you have to do it for you, I wouldn't have done it because I didn't care about me.
Right.
I didn't care about me enough to cross the street for me. I did care about my kid.
As a great starting point.
As a starting point.
Yeah.
To maintain,
Right.
you do. But if whatever gets you in the door, man.
Right, because you weren't. You would never have gotten to the door if it was just you.
I would have just self-destructed. I would have had no problem with that
Right.
because I loathed myself by the end of it. I looked in the mirror and couldn't stand anything about who I was, but I knew from personal experience that what life my son was going to be subjected to with a mother who's an alcoholic because I lived that life. And so I went to treatment. I went on July 29th, 2013. My first time in treatment was my last time in treatment. The last drink I ever took was the last drink I ever took. I've been sober since then. I actually had 10 years in July this past year. So my son, you know, now more of his life has been with a sober mom than not. He was 5 when I got sober. He's 15 now. And but one of the things that I then found out very shortly after getting sober was that's when I truly began to understand that drugs and alcohol were not my problem, they were my solution. They were how I fixed everything I felt about myself.
Oh, yes.
They were how I had liquid courage in the face of all of my social anxiety. They were how I medicated my insecurity has been at the root of everything.
Right.
And I understood that even as I walked into treatment, I felt like if I could just get self-esteem, I'd be okay. Could I just go buy it at a store? Because that was so then what I found is, so now I'm not drinking anymore, and that provides you a little bit of self-esteem because you're not engaging in those behaviors that you were in active addiction, but guess what else insecurity is also at the root of is codependency.
Right.
So then I went through a very, very 4.5 years sober in the most toxic relationship I've ever been in, you know, with, again, one of those buzzwords, narcissist, but a real one. Not somebody who takes a lot of selfies, not somebody who's selfish, a stone cold narcissist who commits psychological warfare on you. But again, ultimately, I don't even look back on that with all of this disdain or grief or horror. It was bad, but it forced me to look at things that I wouldn't maybe have looked at without it. Me personally, I have to take the horrific things that I went through and I have to pull something good out of them. And I know there are people who look at their trauma and they go, no, it's innately bad. Don't try to make it nice. And that's fine. That's yours. But I can't do that.
But you have to walk. I mean, at least within the work I do with my clients, yes, all of this stuff is horrible. But at the end of the day, as we process this stuff and you get to get to the other side, there's something that you discover about yourself.
Yeah.
There's that power. You're essentially taking that power back. So that
Yes.
that positive thing, like, okay, yes, all that happened, but now I know that I'm a good person. That it was never my fault.
Right.
It was, whatever that empowering thing
Right.
is, that you can take it back so that now you're in control,
Yes.
and somebody else or
Yes.
something else isn't.
And
Right.
and that's the thing is, a lot of trauma leaves people feeling like it's that loss of control. It's that it wasn't my fault. It's this helplessness. Now, if I take, I volunteer for the AFSP. They have a program called Healing Conversations. It's peer support for people who lose someone to suicide and they want to talk to somebody else who's been through that loss, because it's a very unique loss and type of grief.
Most definitely.
So I can contribute that. I can talk to people who have been through that, and I can be there for them, and I can offer that perspective. I can offer that, just space for them to feel what they're feeling and not feel judged or uncomfortable,
Right.
or feel like their loved one is being judged for passing away that way. And with my addiction, like, that's why I'm open about it. I'm not, I'm always going to be open about it, because there are people who are dying every single day because of the shame and the stigma associated with it. So guess what? Now I can take something and I can, kind of extract water from a rock. Like, a little
Right.
bit of good can come out of that bad thing, and then that bad thing wasn't so horrible, and then my mom's loss and my uncle, it wasn't all in vain.
Right.
It's how I can honor somebody in the best way I can think, instead of, my other option was I was destroying myself in my mom's name, and what a horrible way to remember her.
Right.
So I think that taking that stuff and going, it was horrible, it wasn't my fault, some of these things were my fault, but I can pull good from there, and then I can even take that good and I can use it to help other people.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to add this as we close out. Another big theme I heard was that as long as we keep it a secret, it's going to be in the dark, and these little shame gremlins are going to keep multiplying. But as soon as we pull them out into the light, they stop. Right? I mean, it's not instantaneous. I wish they were.
Yeah.
But if we can get them out of the dark and into the light, we can do so much more than trying to keep everything a big secret.
Right.
So if this is something you're battling, I highly recommend you start talking about it.
Yeah.
And then start looking for help, whether it's a support group or AA, NA, therapy, whatever it is. But definitely start talking about what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
So remember, you can change your thoughts, discover your potential, and transform your life by focusing on your overall well-being. Till next time, continue being the best you possible. Bye.
Bye-bye.